Talk about this one more time. The pineal gland. The pineal gland sits at the center of the brain. It is known as an eye because the pineal gland also contains light-sensitive cells similar to some of the cells that make up the retina, as the Mashiyach spoke in Matthew 6 chapter verses 22 to 23. If we can have Yahuah, if he can bring that out for us. Matthew the 6th chapter verse 22 23. It might sound a little bit different in the Sefer Bible.
Matthew 6, 22 and 3. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye be single, your whole body shall be full of light. But if your eye be evil, your whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you be darkness, how great is that darkness?
Exactly. So what we're trying to share here now is that once a person, again, is fully absorbed in Torah, this person now transcends from a physical being to a spiritual being. And the scriptures is telling us now that Israel is supposed to be a spiritual people. But if you're not following Torah, this is how we can easily say that the light that's inside of you is dark. It is dark. So when we read the parable about the 10 virgins, when 5 of the virgins had lost their light, it's not literally talking about there's no light in the lampstand, but the light has actually gone out inside of the person, and the person is now walking carnally instead of spiritually. And so it is always our responsibility to walk in the light because we are enlightened or enlightened beings. Zakar.
Yeah, I was saying the priests and Levites also had the name of the Father in their forehead, so they might have always known the Father.
Right, exactly.
In Torah.
Absolutely. We're going to go into that too. Absolutely. So everybody's on board. I like to hear that. The book of Exodus, the 28th chapter, verse 36. Zakane. Exodus, the 28th chapter. 28, 36. Yep. To 38.
The book of Shemot, or Exodus 28, verse 36. And you shall make a plate of pure gold and engrave upon it like the engravings of a signet. Set apartness to Yahuah. And you shall put it on a blue lace, that it may be upon the mitre, upon the forefront of the mitre, it shall be. And it shall be upon Aaron's forehead, that Aaron may bear the iniquity of the esteemed things which the children of Yashra'al shall hallow in all their esteemed gifts. And it shall be always upon his forehead, that they may be accepted before Yahuah.
Right. So just like Zakar said now, is that these priestly garments are very, very important. So when a person, when the Levites had on their tunics, they had on the mitre, they had on the turbans. It was very important now that they had now set apartness to the Father, and that gold emblem now, because gold tried through the fire, represent that this person has been tried, and this person is true, and this person has dedicated him or herself to Torah. So this metal plate now is actually put between the eyes, all right, indicating now is that they have involved themselves now in a spiritual awakening, and they are now walking in the pureness of Torah. So everything means something. So last week, we went into a little bit about Bereshit, the 32nd chapter, 22 to 30. Zakane, if you can read that. What I was trying to share at that time here is that Jacob was struggling all his life. He was struggling all his life. He was struggling inside of the womb. He struggled inside of the womb. He struggled with his blessing. He struggled with Laban, and he struggled with the messenger out at we talk about it at a particular location. So we just want to make sure that everybody understands now the location, and there was something else that happened in that encounter there. So as I came, Bereshit, the 32nd chapter, verses 22 to 30, and I'll stay seated so we won't have to keep moving the camera. The book of Exodus, the Bereshit,
32.
yeah, 32, 22.
And you will read to
32 to 22 to 30.
Bereshit, or Genesis 32, verse 22. And he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and his 11 sons and passed over the ford Jabbok.
Right, that word Jabbok is going to be extremely important. It's the Strong's number 4569. And it means it's the Strong's number 2999. And it means emptying, to pour out, to release, to let go. So pay very close to what's going on here now. Jacob is about to have a spiritual encounter. And he's at a place now that's called ford, and it's also called Zabbok. And it means to pour out, to let loose, to give up. Verse 23.
Genesis 23. And he took them and sent them over the brook and sent over that he had. And Yaakov was left alone. And there wrestled a man with him unto the breaking of the day.
Okay, so he's at this particular place where he let loose. Okay, he emptied himself out. That's the word Jabbok means. His wife and his children was on the other side of the brook. And there he wrestled with the man until the breaking of the day. Read on.
And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh. And the hollow of Yaakov's thigh was out of joint, as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let you go, except you bless me. And he said unto him, What is your name? And he said, Yaakov. And he said, Your name shall be called no more Yaakov, but Yashra'al. For as a prince has you power with Elohim and with men, and has prevailed.
Right. So the way that we put this picture together again, he's at this place, all right? He's alone. Each one of us now has to be in this set apart place, so we need to be alone. We need to empty ourselves out. And so when Jacob did that now, we see that again that Jacob's name was changed from Jacob to Israel. So all of the struggling, the supplanter, beguile, all these things now that defines the word Jacob, he had to let all of that go. And once he was able to let all of that go, because we do know, like we went over 2 weeks ago, is that we would not be able to overcome the adversary through might. It's not going to happen. And Jacob tried to overcome Esau in the womb because they were struggling in the womb, trying to pull Esau from off of this position, but he didn't prevail. The only way that we will be able to prevail and to move on or transcend to another level of understanding or become this spiritual being, we have to let go. The Hebrew word Zabbok or Jabbok, empty out ourselves, and once we do that, the Father will then now give us now a new name. Read on.
Bereshit, or Genesis 32, verse 29. And Yaakov asked him and said, Tell me, I pray you, your name. And he said, Wherefore is it that you dost ask after my name?
Right, and so Jacob now is asking this messenger here, what is his name? And the messenger responds, Where is it that thou doest ask after my name? Anybody, after reading the scriptures, know who this person might be?
Mashiyach.
Right, because it tells us now that his name is not actually Wonderful, Counselor. All these attributes is giving, and so we have now Jacob asking the same thing. So everything is linking up totally, no problems. But what we have to do, though, we have to make sure that this is what we want to do. This is the reason why I said earlier now is that what is the responsibility now of a Torah believer? You must endure and fight this fight to the very end. You must give your life for the rest of your life in order now to be considered a Torah believer. You must endure to the end. And what's important about this whole thing now is that it was starting to dawn towards the next day. Notice now that this struggling now happened at night. As it began to dawn towards the next day, the daylight, Jacob now is now transitioning now from a state of darkness to a state of lightness now as the day begins to dawn. So as the daylight shines, he's now a new being in the Mashiyach. He's no longer called Jacob, but now Israel. Now the Father can work with him now, and so this is how now we can call ourselves the children of Israel. But like I said 2 weeks ago, every single last one of us, all right, has that Jacob inside of us. And all of us now needs to be able to wrestle, defeat that enemy, I'm going to call it that enemy, within inside of us in order now to transcend and be the people that we need to be in order to be able to sit down, as you each sat down, at this marriage supper. If you can't overcome that, like Jacob did, you won't be able to make it into this supper here. It is very, very important for us to get a clear understanding of what's going on here in these scriptures. Read on.
Wherefore is it that you dost ask after my name? And he baruched him there. And Yaakov called the name of the place Peniel. For I have seen Elohim pani, or face to face.
Hallelujah. That's what the word Peniel means, face to face. But in order for us to do that now, we must go inside of ourselves, defeat that enemy that's within inside of ourselves, and then we will be able to see the Father face to face. But in wickedness, you will never be able to see the Father face to face. It's just not going to happen. Read on.
And my life is preserved.
Okay, hallelujah. Let's go now to the book of Revelation, the 16th chapter, verses 1 through 9. Mishpachah, we're going to have to slow down a whole lot with Genesis. Let me see with Revelation. And the reason why? Because Yahuah is actually looking at the constellations when he's getting these revelations here. I mean, he's mapping the stars, he's mapping the moon, all of these planets out there. He's watching all of this unfold because it's telling a story. Revelation, the 12th chapter, hold where you're at. Revelations, the 12th chapter, verse 1. Zakar, if you could read that for me, please. Just pay attention to what John is
Revelation chapter 12, verse 1.
what he's actually saying here.
And there appeared a great wonder in Shaman, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars.
We're going to deal with that next week, all right, the following, but these constellations are very, very important. Israel came out of Egypt at a particular time. Prior to Israel, I'll go in more detail with it the next time we speak. When Israel came out of Egypt the first time, we was under a constellation called Taurus. But there was a transcending or a moving from one constellation to the next. When Israel, when the Father is now presenting or showing Moses, this is the beginning of months for you. We're now talking about Israel moving into a different constellation. And that constellation at that time now was Pisces. Aries Duran. We're now about to move into another constellation. So the constellations are constantly changing. Like, for example, I'm at the stand up for this here. Everybody here has a rhythm or a frequency. Like, for example, the very first season we have spring. What astrological or astronomy sign do we have in spring?
Pisces and Aries.
Right. Pisces and Aries. The summer, we have,
Gemini and Leo.
is not Cancer, is it June, like June the 22nd? That should be like Cancer.
Isn't it 3 for each season? It's 3 for each season.
Yeah, I think it's about 3 for each season. And then we have, I just want to touch like at the beginning of these cycles here. Then we have the fall. We have
Virgo, Libra.
right, Virgo, Libra, and then in winter or December we have
Capricorn and Aquarius.
and Aquarius. Very important. Remember when Israel, or when we came out of Egypt, and Moses was gone for 40 days and for 40 nights? What was the first thing that Israel built in the wilderness, signifying their love for the Father? Right. But it was actually now Taurus the bull. Okay, because again, we find it interesting. We'll go over it in more detail next week. When Moses was having a conversation with Pharaoh, who is this Elohim of the Yahuah that you're talking about? This conversation is not that they're talking about constellations. There was a switch about to happen, and Pharaoh didn't understand the switch that was about to happen. Because remember now, Moses said that we can't sacrifice in the land of Egypt. They needed to go outside of Egypt in order to sacrifice. Because if they was to do that sacrifice now, which is sacrificing of a lamb, and the lamb represents Aries, okay? Let's see, again, Aries here now is that will be a conflict of interest. And this is the reason why he said that they would surely kill us if we were to do that sacrifice in Egypt. So this has a lot to do with the constellations, a whole lot, the movement of the stars and the planets and everything like that. And we can show all this in Scripture. Just the reason why the Father said that, can you bring out these constellations now out of this season? Everything is happening under a season. Even the disagreeable beings now, when they was cast into the pigs, they even asked the Mashiyach, have you come to cast us out before our time? Our season. Everything gets a chance to operate for a season. Then after that season is done, then another power comes into play. The same way that we have the Babylonians, they had a season to run. All right? The Medo-Persian Empire, they had a season to run. The Greco-Roman Empire, they had a season to run. And just like we say now, America is not going to last forever. There's going to come a time now when even after all of that, when this comes to an end, we now want to find now that the righteous kingdom of the Father of Yahuah now is going to reign forever. Now, one more time, Zakar, and we'll kind of leave it. I just wanted to touch on it here a little bit. Revelation, the 12th chapter, verse 1 again. What John is actually seeing. Read on.
And there appeared a great wonder in Shamayim, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars.
Right, hallelujah. So we'll leave that there, but I just want to make sure that we understand exactly what's going on with this vision that John is actually seeing here. So we're going to go to the book of Revelation, the first chapter, verse 1 through 9, and we'll shut it down from there. 16th chapter, right.
Revelation 16, verse 1. And I heard a great voice out of the temple saying to the 7 messengers, go your way and pour out the vials of the wrath of Elohim upon the earth.
Right. So this is now coinciding with Revelation, the 7th chapter. If we find ourselves now where the Father now is giving the commission for these messengers now to go out now and actually hurt the earth, that means now that the 144,000 were already sealed. Because don't hurt the earth or the sea until the 144,000 are actually sealed. Read on.
And there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast.
And again, one more time as I can, that the first went out and poured out his vial.
Okay. Revelation 16, verse 1. Verse 2.
Right.
And the first went and poured out his vial upon the earth, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image.
So, the Father is marking his people, the adversary is marking his people. And so we want to make sure that we don't receive that mark. And again, what needs to happen with inside of all of us, we all need to now transcend from this physical person now into the spiritual. Because we don't want the mark of the adversary on us. Read on.
Verse 3. And the second messenger poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became as the blood of a dead man, and every living soul died in the sea.
That's very important. When this angel, or this messenger, poured out his vial upon the sea, because we're talking about, again, the 42 months, what is going to actually happen now during this time where we need to be really, really strong and come together as a family or a Mishpachah? It said now that the second messenger poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became as blood of a dead man, and every living soul, or the rock, and everything that was in the sea died. Everything died in the salt sea. Every single thing. So, for us, when we begin to see what's about to happen, what type of person should you be? Because again, we have all of the examples in what we call in the Old Testament, and especially with Jacob. That wrestling now that was going on again, I'm going to keep saying that was going on inside of them, we must make sure that we're able to overcome any type of disagreeable spirits that's within inside of us, so that we will be able to overcome when these things begin to happen. Because once these messengers are set loose, and they begin to hurt the earth, and if you have the mark of the adversary on you, and you have not checked yourself, you might find yourself in a world of trouble. Read on.
Revelation 16, verse 4. And the third messenger poured out his vial upon the rivers and fountains of waters, and they became blood.
Now, watch what happened in the difference between verse 3 and the difference between verses 3 and verse 4. It said, now the third messenger poured out his vial upon the rivers. Okay, so we have first the sea, now it's being poured out upon the rivers and the fountains. The fountains are the spring water. That's your clean water here now. Even that's going to be contaminated. And that became also as blood. Again, what type of person do we need to be? How should we be rehearsing the righteous acts, being that we understand what's about to befall us in these last days here? Verse 5.
And I heard the messenger of the waters say, you are righteous, O Elohim, which art and was and shalt be, because you hast judged us.
Right, and so when all these things are happening, a lot of people are going to say, listen, you know what? There are going to be so many people dying. All right? All these dead fish, all these things that's happening, the messenger is saying that the Father is just in doing all of this. Because a lot of times we might have sympathy when we see a lot of what they call accidents and tragedies that are happening. It's not even a bird can fall from out of Shamayim unless the Father calls for it to happen.
That's right.
It just can't happen. So we need to be strong when we begin to see these things happening. I find it very interesting. A couple of weeks, it was a little bit longer than that. They showed it was like a big orca whale. This thing was huge, and it came from out of the water. It beached itself, and so they got all these marine what you call it? Biologists.
Right.
Yeah, and they dragged the thing back into the water. It came back out of the water again, back onto the beach. And what I just find interesting here now, being that we're talking about everybody's frequency, even inside of the water, there's a frequency inside of the water. There's a natural rhythm that's inside of the water, but now it's being disturbed. And what happens now is that a lot of times you might see fish now out of its prime area or its location because it now lost its balance. And each and every one of us has a balance or a frequency. I was talking with Lamont a couple of days ago, and what we were talking about is Pesach. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more too, a little bit later, all right? It is my argument that in Exodus the 12th chapter, when the Father shared with Moses that this is the beginning of years for us, what does that mean? Because Moses was already educated in all of the science, all of the math, and everything of Egypt. But something is different what the Father is sharing with Moses versus what he already learned in Egypt. This is the beginning of the year. Then you have to ask yourself, when is the beginning of the year for the Egyptians? It's totally different. Everywhere that I have read, the Egyptians now, they start their new year based upon the overflowing of the Nile River. That's where they start theirs, and this usually happens around June. But for us now, we have the month of Abib, and the month of Abib usually happens around April. Now, we have the beginning of the month. We have the sun at a certain position. We also have the moon at a certain position. The moon has her own curious path, all right? 354 days. The sun has 364 days, so it's like a 10-day difference. This is my argument. The next year Pesach comes around. It is Pesach, but the alignments of the celestial bodies in Shamayim might not be the same. What's going to make the next Pesach the Pesach is because now everything is lining up exactly the way that it happened the first time. Not to say that the second year, the third year, the fourth year, the fifth year was not Pesach, but when it happens, the way that it happened when we came out of Egypt, that's the memorial there. And what I was trying to share is that even with our birthdays, for example, my birthday is October the 19th. I don't know where the moon was at, where the sun was at, where the stars were at. But what's going to make it more unique, where I am now more in line with my frequency, is when I was first born. Whatever position the stars was in, the moon and the sun. That's when I'm now more balanced now with the rhythm that's inside of my body. Everybody here has a rhythm.